All right, so we are looking at Ireland, and we are looking at modern conflicts, but as I said yesterday, in order to understand the conflict, we need to know, as our first objective, some of the basics and some of the background. We also need to know who the players are, and this will help us learn that. As you learned in the Ed puzzle, Christianity arrives in Ireland during the era of the Roman Empire. So it's been there for a very long time. As such, because Ireland is not in Eastern Europe, it is part of the Roman Catholic Church and stays there after the split in 1054. The next major event we need to talk about in terms of conflict in Ireland and the religious background is the next conqueror, and that's England. There are some other folks doing things in between. The Irish had some trouble with the Vikings, but the thing that will cause really fundamental change is the conquest by England under Henry VIII. Remember, Henry VIII is the famous, or especially if you're a Catholic in Ireland, the infamous founder of England's Protestant church. Also the guy who had a lot of his wives killed, if that helps make him more memorable to you. The Irish were not happy about being conquered by the English, especially because England was now a Protestant conqueror. And in response to this, Henry VIII's daughter, Queen Elizabeth I, started the Plantations program. Now, when we think about plantations in the United States, if you remember some of your American history, we think about southern plantations, large areas of land owned by slaveholders who grew things like cotton or tobacco. Kind of the same idea. Agriculture is going to happen here, but also think about it as planting the people you want to get rid of the people you don't want. So let's to make that clearer. So you take the land away from the Catholics in areas that have given you a lot of rebellion. And then you plant Protestant Scots and English colonists who will be loyal to Queen Elizabeth and to the English government. And you also think about them as you're planting the Scots and the English, and they are a crop that is going to crowd out and push out the Catholics. Because once you've given them land, you can expect that they're going to fight against the Catholic rebels in order to keep it. Now, this can all sound pretty dull, doesn't inspire much of a reaction in most of us today, but I want you to consider the options in the Pear Deck. What would we call this plantations program if somebody did something like it today? I'm not going to take a lot of time on this. You just need to select the answer. the most common answer was ethnic cleansing. And I think that probably is the best description of what that is. This has happened in my lifetime in different countries. What you're doing is you are pushing one ethnic group out of a place, sometimes killing them in the process, but you are giving that land that you've just pushed the other ethnic group off of to members of your own ethnic group. Now, for those of you that picked the other two options, they are also correct. You can think of this as counterinsurgency. It's pretty common. Right? What you do in a counterinsurgency is you try to get people loyal to you, to control different areas and kind of put down the rebellions for you. The United States has done this. I don't want you to think the United States did ethnic cleansing in some of our recent counterinsurgencies in the war on terror. That's not what we did. We did lots of ethnic cleansing when it came to the Native Americans, though. And that leads to the next thing, reservations. And if you think about what the American government did to Native Americans, we forced them off of land. We put mostly white settlers there to hold on to the land and fight against any Native Americans that would try and take it back. And we forced the Native Americans to stay in designated areas. That's reservations. That's also ethnic cleansing. That was also how we did counterinsurgency against the Native Americans. Bottle them up in one place, control other territory with white settlers, and it makes it much easier for the United States Army, mostly cavalry, to go around and put down any rebellions that come from the Native Americans. So, like I said, ethnic cleansing, if we think about it from the 21st century perspective, is probably the most accurate, but it is also these things too. So if you picked A and C, you're just as right as the people who picked B. Hope that doesn't sound too confusing. Ran us all the way back to the beginning. And what's going to matter in the long run for us is that the plantations were most successful, meaning the settlers that went there stayed there and kept control of that territory. That was most successful in this part, in Ulster, in Northern Ireland. As you can see here, they tried plantations in other places, but they were most successful here. We're going to jump ahead in history a ways, because remember, Queen Elizabeth, she is the queen at the time of the Spanish Armada's attempted invasion in 1588, so it's been a while that we've had the plantations established. So we're skipping ahead to 1801. At that point, Ireland is fully brought into the United Kingdom. It's not just a colony that the United Kingdom controls. Also, if you're wondering, what's this United Kingdom business? I thought we were talking about England. Yeah, some other stuff's happened that I'll tell you about, but you don't need to be too worried about remembering. In 1707, England, which also controlled Wales, joined with Scotland to form the United Kingdom. There was a kingdom in Scotland, a kingdom in England that also controlled Wales. Don't forget about the Welsh. And that became one United Kingdom of England, Wales, and Scotland. Right? Now they've added Ireland to that. That happens in 1801. In the second half of that same century, Irish Catholics start making demands. Specifically, they wanted something called home rule within the United Kingdom. Home rule means something very specific. And the name does kind of make sense, right? You want to rule yourself at home. Right? You want control of your own home. But home rule does not mean independence. You're going to stay part of the United Kingdom, but you want to be able to do things your way within Ireland. And for us to think about that, because this was still a long time ago in a country that most of us don't have much of a connection with, in the Pear Deck, I want you to answer these two questions. How were the demands of the Irish like the demands that our founders made, right? Those rebellious American colonists. And how were they different from those demands? I know that's asking you to go back to what, 7th grade? Was the last time you got that part of American history? Is that right? Or is 7th grade ancient history and then 8th grade is American history? Brian, you don't remember? You guys had a pandemic happen in there that kind of derailed things a bit. Just do your best. How were the demands of the Irish like the demands American colonists made? And how were they different? I'm going to add a bit more time because some of you are typing and I'm seeing some good stuff. Okay, so with what's different, Americans end up demanding more, right? They end up demanding independence. So different time periods, for one. What's similar is that they both wanted to govern themselves without the UK stepping in and governing for them. Right? And again, the difference is the Irish aren't asking for independence. As we know, eventually, the American colonists do. We fight an American war of independence, and we become an independent country. So that's some of the big difference. But what started the Americans off in the first place was they didn't feel like they got to govern themselves at home. The British were imposing taxes that we didn't like, telling us we couldn't move into certain parts of North America. And so there are some similarities. Notice also the Irish are doing this after Americans have already declared independence. So the Irish can look at this and be like, it can be done, but that's not what they asked for. Right? They make a more modest demand. Why were they demanding this in the first place? One, they're angry about some stuff. One is the potato famine. And I'm guessing all of you have heard of the potato famine. It happens in the mid-1800s. And kills over 1 million Irish. Unfortunately, a lot of you have learned about the potato famine in a very incomplete way. It wasn't necessary or inevitable that 1 million Irish would die. Sure, the potato crops were devastated. There would have been a shortage of food, but the Irish didn't just grow potatoes. They grew other crops. They grew grains. They raised livestock. They had dairy. But the government of the United Kingdom in London forced the Irish to continue to ship food out of Ireland to England while the Irish are starving. So they forced them to keep exporting food that they really couldn't spare. So the United Kingdom's government is responsible for a lot of those Irish deaths. That's the part that you don't get in most of the history classes. Don't This isn't a conspiracy. I don't want anybody calling up Alex Jones to say they've unearthed some great truth that was suppressed by everybody. I mean, your teachers just didn't tell you. They probably didn't have time, and it wasn't in your textbook. They were also angry about prejudice against Irish Catholics. That we can see, this image shows us the potato famine with malnourished children, starving adults. But you've all heard the phrase adding insult to injury. Right? The potato famine is the injury. The prejudice is the insult. For one thing, if you were Catholic, the United Kingdom wouldn't even let you serve in the legislature, the part of the government that makes laws, until 1829. Yeah, you may, Xander. For the sake of time, Xander, just go ahead and take it. And part of why Catholics weren't allowed in were because of these stereotypes of the Irish. This is their depiction in British political cartoons of the Irish. What is that? It can be small for some of you towards the back of the room. What is that thing? A monkey. Right? They were portraying, right, the Irish as monkeys. For the United Kingdom, right, racism towards Africans, whether Africans in Africa or Africans that had been brought to the United Kingdom, right, or as slaves to places in the Caribbean, blacks and the Irish were looked at the same way, as subhuman, like monkeys. Right? So, I mean, this is, if you want to understand how the British think about this, right, the same racism that was applied to Africans was applied to the Irish. They were seen as the same. Right? The only difference was skin color, and the English really, in that case, didn't think skin color mattered. And this represents the civilized English. He's wearing a uniform, and he's bringing this